Happy Wednesday. So, today we are going over rental listings. And by that, I actually mean income producing properties that you are listing for sale. The reason for this is that I've come across a number of issues with these over the years. I'm seeing it more and more recently. So, if you have a property that is bringing in income from a rental source, be it a long-term rental, short-term rental, mid-term, corporate, what have you. There are a number of things that you should pay attention to, action steps you should take before you get ready to sell that property. So that's what we're talking about. First one, obviously, is the same as a lot of other properties, and that is make sure that your condition is indicative of the price that you're hoping to get. So if you are to the point where you know it's a little bit distressed, you just want to offload the property, you know it's going to be an investor sale, completely fine. That's fine. But if you want to make the biggest return, please look at it the way that you would selling a personal home as well. You're going to go in, you're going to make sure you're doing new paint, make sure nothing's broken. Maybe if there's little things that you did a little bit differently because it was a rental, you might want to reverse. I've seen a number of times where you have beautiful natural hardwood floors, but because it's a rental, you're going to cover that up with like an LVP or a linoleum or a carpet or something so that you don't have the maintenance of that hardwood. That's fine. That's normal. But when you go to sell it, if you want that to be a selling point, go ahead and just redo those floors. You don't have to, but understand that your value is not going to be the same as if you had put in that work. The bigger thing, as far as how the sale is going to work, is if you have renters in place. Now, I'm a huge advocate of actually factoring in vacancy when you're running your numbers, right? If your rental cannot operate with a couple months of vacancy and still be profitable, you're doing something wrong. So if you 100% for sure are selling, it's a property that would be very marketable to maybe a first-time home buyer, someone downsizing, or just in general, someone who's going to be an occupant, and you want to include those as well as investors, then it might make sense to go ahead and let your renters get out if they're planning on moving anyway, and really making it showable, right? Because if you can't walk through it, it's a lot harder to sell. Not that it won't sell, but there's a smaller buyer pool then. So if you really want the top dollar, want a diversity of buyers, and your tenants are moving out anyway, go ahead and get them out, freshen up the place, then let's list it. If tenants are still there, completely fine. That's normal. A lot of people actually want to buy them with the tenants in place. That can be lucrative for a number of reasons. First of all, they don't have to figure out getting tenants. Secondly, it can qualify for more loan types because it already has cash flow. So it's not guesswork on if it would bring the profit or not. We can track where it has been profitable. And that's great on short-term rental too. There are two different things that are hard with this. First one is if you are severely under market rent, please, I know it sucks to be the bad guy, but go ahead and up those renters to what they're going to be upped anyway. Because if you leave it at say it's like a duplex and each side could rent for $1,400 a month, and you have one person on 600 and the other one on 7, that's not going to sell with those rental rates. And then even if they're not on a lease, which mind you, if they're on a lease, you can't just do this. You have to wait till a new lease term. But if they are on a lease and that comes into play, well, now it's not, the numbers don't really work because they're not making a profit, right? And then they're looking at it like, I'm going to have to be the one to go up on rent on these renters. And then if they can't pay it or if they don't want to pay it, I have to worry about evicting them. And I have to be the bad guy and I have to go through all these processes. And no one wants to do that. So if you're in that position, go ahead and talk to your tenants, see what their plan is. If they plan to stay with increased rent, if so, go ahead and do it on the front end. You have that relationship. It's going to go a lot better than the next person. It's also going to make your property a lot more marketable. If you are trying to find someone to buy it at the rate that they are, that's fine too, but just know that you're going to make a lot less on it. And market it as such. If you're like, hey, these people have a lease in place. And I've seen it go that way too, where you have really good tenants, you're doing right by them, you don't need the money as much. So you go ahead and sign them in a new lease at that rental rate. So then that means the next person has to honor that. That's great. But then we can't list it for what it would be listed as far as the comps because your rental rate isn't going to comp out and the numbers aren't going to work. If you similarly, this is what I really see the most is when you have short-term, midterm, whatever the case may be, furnished rental that someone is leasing out. And I've seen this happen with a super cute B&B as well, not just like Airbnb, VRBO, but like a fully functioning bed and breakfast. In both scenarios of how I've seen this multiple locations, people just get tired, right? And you're like, I have this property, it's producing income, but it's just a lot to manage. And so you take a couple years and you put in a little less work and you make less profit. And then you put in a little less work and you make less profit. And then it gets to the point where it's really not that profitable anymore and you're still exhausted. And so you go, okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and offload this property. This is your worst case scenario, the worst thing you can do. And here's why. Because your books had it as a profitable venture. It did. And then you took your years where you're taking multiple vacations or you're just not booking as much or you're doing only longer term because you don't want to handle the turnover. And now it's rented not as often. So you're making less profit. Well, guess what? When someone goes to get an investment loan on that property and they're leveraging your books for their loan, the bank is looking at it and going, it's been losing money year over year. This doesn't look like it's going to be profitable. It's not a good risk to take, and we don't want to issue the loan on it. And so then you go with people that are either entirely doing it against themselves, or they're buying in cash. But people who would have bought the property based on the cash flow are not, because it looks like it's not cash flowing because you didn't want to put in the work. So if you're getting to the point where your property seems like it's too much, you don't really want to do it, either go ahead and jump what feels like jumping the gun, list it, or hire someone to manage it. Even if it's not as profitable, it's still going to make more sense than slowly decreasing your profits, and then still ending up with the same end result, right? And if you hire someone, you may find, oh, well, with all this work taking off of me, it makes sense to keep it. And now I still have this revenue, this income, this great property that's continuing to build equity, build value, and bring me additional income. And if it's still too much, guess what? Cool. Then your books are still great. So when you do sell it, it's going to be profitable. It's going to be cute. It's going to be maintained. And it's going to sell quickly and for a lot of money. And that's the goal, right? So I think that's probably where I'm going to leave it right now. You with tenants in place. Oh, that's the only other thing. If you do still have tenants in place, a couple of things. I do always like the no showings until accepted offer because it is respectful of your tenants and their privacy. It does make it kind of annoying to sell. So my alternative is if you do like a couple days a month where you hold it open, they can go get dinner or whatever, and your agent's holding it open, and you can let people come see it. If your tenants are weird about privacy, which not super weird, totally normal, probably not the best word, but if they don't want people coming into their home while they're still living there, you can work it the other way. Either way you go, if you have tenants in place, please do whatever you can that they are on board with you selling. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have been in a home and the renter is there trash talking the property, the landlord, telling us about all kinds of problems that may or may not exist. So keep that in mind, because for me, I always think, and I'm going to look, I mean, definitely if a renter is bringing things to our attention, those are things that we are extra looking for in the home inspection. But I'm going to go ahead and take a cursory look myself too, just because you do this long enough, you kind of see some things. So if they're like, the basement floods all the time, I'm going to look for signs of previous water damage in the basement. And sometimes I see it. I do. Other times, perfectly dry, no issues at all. And I'm sitting there thinking, is this just occasional and something that we need to come back when it's raining? Or is this maybe just someone who's salty about having to move? Let's be real. Rental costs are insane right now. If someone has a good price, they probably don't want to find a new place because they're not going to find it for the same price. So please consider that. Don't be completely selfish in your decision. You obviously have to do what's best for you. But take into account your tenants because they can make or break your sale. For example, I have a seller client with property coming up. He does have renters in place. What he's offering is to go ahead and pay their deposit on their next place. He knows that they can make the rent because they've been great. But in the event that the purchaser does not want to keep them, which is he's anticipating, he's paying their deposit on the next place. And so that makes them a lot easier to work with. And it just makes everything smoother. So please remember your tenants are people. Treat them like people. If you want to protect them, if you want to raise the money on the rent, if you want to get the most for it, what have you, there are a lot of different avenues to go. I really recommend getting with someone early so we can kind of look at your situation, look at how the tenants feel, what the property looks like, what comps are, and determine what the best course of action is going to be for you and for them. But please keep in mind that all of this factors in. If it is not vacant, updated, maintained, gorgeous, you're limiting your buyer pool. If it does not have great numbers, you're limiting your buyer pool. And it's kind of a catch-22 because it depends on who's going to buy it, right? And that's where we really need to see the property and figure out who our ideal buyer is and which strategy is going to work the best to make the most money. So if you're in this position, you have a rental property that is a little bit draining on you, please reach out. Let's go over some strategies for you. And it may even be to keep it. Just depends on what works for you. So I hope that's been helpful. Something a little bit out of the ordinary. But as always, I'm happy to help. I know sometimes I'm clear as a mud, but a one-on-one is way easier because we're talking about your specific property and not me thinking of 12 different ones in my head. So as always, have a happy Wednesday, and I will see you